Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Men, you want a secret? You want me to tell you what will put your wife in the mood for sex? You want the inside information, what makes her want you? You ready for this? Because I'm gonna give you the secret. Hey, this is Faith Influencer Podcast. Jim Cunningham, welcome. We're talking about all things sex. We're talking about sex inside of marriage. And now we're going to talk about sex inside of blended marriages, blended families. So let me remind you of some things. God created it. It's good. God's pro-sex. God wants you to enjoy it. It's enjoyed inside marriage. That's how God designed it. He created it so that it creates an intimacy like nothing else can create. And so that's God's design. But let's be honest. The world has perverted it. The world has taken what God created. The enemy has taken what God created and perverted it so it's lost the meaning that God wants it to have. Let's get back to it. Let's get back to the way God designed it. So I'm giving you some practical advice. And here's the first thing I want to give you today that some of you need, and especially some of you guys, because some of you guys who listen to this, no, not you guys, some of the guys that I talk to in my personal groups are just dumb. They're just dumb. And so this is the kind of advice they need. And so you listen in, okay? So I'm talking to a group of men and I'm asking questions. And I'm not trying to hurt them or embarrass them. So I'm letting them raise their hands. And some of the questions I ask them and I see their responses, in my head, though I'm not saying it out loud, I'm thinking, I'm moving your wife up on my prayer list because you're so dumb, because you're so clueless of what's going on, especially in the bedroom. So here we go. Did you know that sex is different for men and women? Surely you know that. Sex is different for men and women. It doesn't mean the same. It's a different approach for a man and for a woman. Now, we always emphasize that sex is for men. That used to be the way it was. Back in the old days, sex was just surely for men. Women don't enjoy sex. Women don't need sex. Women are how men have sex. That's what a woman's for. That's the way it was in the old day. But that's really not how God created it. Women are to enjoy sex too, but they approach it differently than a man does. It's so important if a man understands that his wife's need for sex is strong, but it's different. So I want to describe those differences. So men are visual. That's just what it is. Men get excited by visual. Women, I'm not saying they don't like visual, but I'm going to say that women are more emotional. It's more of an emotional connection for your wife. There's more of an emotional need for her than for you. So there's this old saying, and I remember it as far back as I can think, that sex begins in the kitchen. Now, if you've never heard that before, you guys are saying, I'm all for it. If sex begins in the kitchen, then let's start in the kitchen. Well, that's not what it's talking about, dummy. It's not talking about having sex in the kitchen. When it says that sex begins in the kitchen, what it means is help her do the dishes, and that'll put her in the mood. Help her empty the dishwasher, and that'll put her in the mood. Sex is different for men and for women. I'm going to describe it in several ways today, and you're going to get it as we go through it. So if you're in a blended family like I am, and you're in your next marriage, I used to say second marriage, but I've discovered that for some of you, maybe your third marriage or whatever, and you're in this marriage, and there's some struggles that come with a blended family, as you know. Also, your second, third marriage, or whatever marriage it is, after your first marriage, there's some struggles that come with that as well, especially in the bedroom. There's some built-in struggles that come in the bedroom when you've remarried. Now, if you have a blended family, here's the secret I promised you. If you have a blended family and she has children, you have children, and you've all come together and you say, yeah, what would put her in the mood? Let me tell you, here's the secret, okay? I promised, here it is. What would put her in the mood so that she can't wait to get you in the bedroom? Are you ready? Here it is. You loving on her children. That's what it is. You taking her son out in the backyard and playing catch. You spending time with her daughter and let her daughter tell you about how school went. You loving on her children means more to her than just about anything you can do. That's the difference in a blended family. And when you are loving, genuinely loving her children, it melts her heart. I'm telling you, her heart melts when you love her kids. And not only does her heart melt, but when her heart melts, remember what I said? Women have an emotional attachment to sex in the bedroom. When you are showing that kind of attention to your stepchildren, to her children, you know what she wants? You. She wants you. Now, don't be stupid. I work with the guy who all of these years thought that his wife would want him because he worked out and had big muscles. He would flex his muscles as if somehow or another that was going to make her want him. Well, maybe she likes that he takes care of himself, but it's not the same. Guys, you're visual. You're visual. But your wife wants more of an emotional connection. So just because you work out doesn't mean that she's going to want you. She wants you when there's that emotional connection. You pay attention to her, and she's more than just a sex partner for you. That's what she wants. So it's different for men and for women. Here's something else, how it's different. How about this? Has this ever happened? Have you ever gotten in a fight? You and your spouse, you're in this fight. I know you've gotten in a fight because we all do. I don't call them fights. I like to say my wife and I are having a discussion. But you know what it means. So you're in this fight, and it's whatever it is, your emotions go like this. I mean, they just shoot up. And let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, they go to a 10. And you're having you're mad, whatever it's over. Maybe it's over the children. Maybe it's over her kids because she doesn't like how you discipline them or how the tone you use in talking to them, or you favored your kid over her kid, all of this stuff. Those were in previous podcasts. You can go listen to those. But your emotional state has gone from a 1, which is everything is perfectly calm, to a 10. Now you've had this fight. Fight's over. Even if you come to an agreement, whatever's happened, fight's over, and you walk away. Here's what happens to your emotions. You're both at a 10. Watch. This is her. This is you. Your emotions do this. Hers do this. Here's what a guy can do. You can have a knockdown drag out with your wife, and a guy can say right after the fight, hey, you want to have sex? He doesn't care. He doesn't care that you just had a knockdown drag out and you called him everything. If you want to have sex after that's over, he's ready to do it. Because his emotional state, this is the way God created it, his emotional state will go from a 10 down to a 3 quickly. But guess what, guys? Your wife's emotional state doesn't move that fast. She doesn't go from a 10 to a 3 and ready to have sex like you. Hers moves down way slower. It's creeping down this emotional state. She has to overcome that knockdown, drag out fight, and it takes her a lot longer than it takes you. So she's not going to have a fight and then be ready to have sex right after that, even though you could. Why? Because it's more emotional for her. So sex is different for men and for women. So let's keep going. Now, because sex is so important and ought to be such an important part of your marriage, how do you make it better? Well, maybe it would help if you got a different viewpoint. This is a viewpoint I heard from someone the other day, and it's this. Let's just look at sex as the marketplace. let's just say we go to the marketplace and this is where we have sex. And guess what? My wife is the marketplace, and for her, I'm the marketplace. And because we're committed to each other inside of a Christian marriage, we're the only marketplace. There's nowhere else to go. That's what we've committed to, right? Maybe what you've committed to. That's it. So what happens if your wife is the marketplace for sex and the market's closed? Well, no guy likes it when the market's closed, but sometimes the market's closed. But here's a different perspective. Wife, have you thought about this? You're the only place he can go. That's your commitment. There's no other place for him to go that's right. So if you understand that, there may be a time during the month where you close the market. At least you can't have sex, but there may be some other ways that you can help him. You know what I'm saying? There may be some other ways that you can help him where that doesn't so much feel like the market is closed. And men, you can do the same thing for your wife if need be. But the point is if you've committed that you're the only marketplace for each other, then you have to consider what it means when you close the marketplace. So wife, is it any surprise to you that if you're manipulating sex and you've closed the market, that if you walk in on your husband and he's looking on the computer at pornography? Is it that a surprise to you? Many years ago, I was counseling with a couple, and here was their story, and you don't know them, and I'm not going to give you their name, so I'm going to tell you their story. She walks in, and he literally has his pants, this is her description to me in counseling, with him sitting there. She said, I walk in and his pants are down to his knees, and he's doing you know what in front of the computer looking at pornography. Well, that's not right. That's not what, that guy was wrong. I'm gonna tell you, he was wrong in doing that. That's not God's will. That's not right. But there are more factors than just him sitting there and doing that. As we went on, I'm not going to get into it other than to say she had closed the marketplace for some time. And that's where he found his release, was sitting in front of that computer. I mean, it created guilt for him because he knew he shouldn't be doing that, but he didn't know where else to go. He wasn't going to go to some other woman because that's not the marketplace. And his wife closed the marketplace, so that's where he turned. So when you understand that you've made a commitment to each other and you don't consider that if you withhold sex from your partner, that there's nowhere else for them to go, and it may be, even though it wasn't correct for him to do that, it may be that she's partly to blame as well because she put him in a position where else was he to go? So open the marketplace back. Now, I received a question and I don't know how to answer it. And I'm going to throw this at you. And if you have a good suggestion, then throw it in the comments because we need some help with this. I'm going to give you an idea, but I haven't done any research on this, so I don't really know what the answer is. So I've always said that in a blended family and in your second marriage, that sex is different. It can be just as enjoyable if you walk through areas of forgiveness and you deal with those issues so that this is your first marriage again. You know what I mean when I say that? That you have dealt with the past and you've been forgiven of whatever. And now you two come together and you're one. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. But what happens when you come together and you have a new spouse, and let's just say wife has a new husband and he is not very good in bed? That question has come up because she can't help in some ways compare to what she knew before. And so she comes and he's not very good. Maybe he's clueless as to what he's doing, and she's shocked because it's not that pleasurable. He's just not very good. And she's comparing. What do you do? What do you do? Well, I don't know. Put it in the comments. What are we going to tell everybody here? What do they do? Well, I can tell you what not to do. Okay, I don't know everything to do here, but I can tell you what not to do. Why? Don't tell him Don't even go in the direction that you're not as good as my first husband. Are you kidding? Let me tell you something that's maybe the most fragile thing with your husband, his ego. And not just his ego, but I'm talking about his ego related to sex. If you ever, ever say to your husband that he's not as good as someone else, or it doesn't feel the same, or he's not the same size, or whatever, you know what's going to happen? He's going to struggle with sex. You see all these commercials about men having dysfunctions. Do you know where that comes from? Not usually. It's seldom a actual physical problem. It's almost always a mental issue, an emotional issue. And many times that comes because the wife was careless in her words and what she said to her man because he wasn't pleasing her like she wanted to be pleased. So, wife, don't do that to him. I mean, if you say to your husband something like that where he feels like his performance is subpar and it's not very good, I'm going to tell you, that's the one area where a man's emotions, remember me telling you, a woman gets to a 10 in a fight and a man's can go down quickly. If you talk about his sexuality and his physical attributes, his emotional level that's at a 10 is going to be stuck there for a long, long time. You cannot do that. So what do you do? What do you say if that's your case? Well, maybe you can say it in a different way. It was suggested. Maybe you can come to him and say something like, "You know what, honey? We've been doing this for a while like this. Let's try a different position. Let's try something different." Well, I can promise you he'll be all for it. I know guys. I know how we are. You suggest that, he's ready. Try that. Suggest to him we do something different. Maybe that will help. Or maybe you want to approach and say, "You know what? Let's just make our marriage, even in the bedroom, better. And let's learn as much as we can learn. I want this to be the last time that we're ever married. So let's make sure every area of our life is good." And then go through some book together. Find some information. There are lots of material out there. There's lots of podcasts, videos, whatever it is, that talk about the bedroom, talk about sexuality, all of these areas that we're talking about. So maybe that's the approach that you take. And then for those of you who have some other suggestions, throw them in there in the comments. People will read those, and that'll be helpful to all of us. So let me wrap this up in this way. In a blended family, when you've come together, oftentimes in your second marriage or third marriage or whatever it is, oftentimes you have all of this baggage that you've brought with you, and that affects the bedroom. It really does. That affects your ability to give yourself to him. Trust is a big issue, especially for a woman. Trust is a big issue when you're having sex with someone. You trust them. If you've carried over mistrust from a previous relationship, and that's like in your backpack that you're carrying around, you have to deal with that. If you're saying, why isn't it that I just don't like sex, or I don't want to have sex? Usually is because there's some issues that are unresolved. That's normally what it is. Now, there can be physical things happen. Go to your doctor. That's possible. But most of the time, it's unresolved issues. And in my experience, it's unresolved issues from a previous marriage that you've drug over into your new marriage, and it's causing issues in the bedroom. And it's making it difficult for you because somehow or another, even though your new husband isn't your old husband, there's a connection there, and you're still remembering that lack of trust that you had before. So deal with that, okay? Deal with some of those issues. That's why I always suggest marriage counseling is for every single marriage. Sometime or another, make your game better and talk to someone and deal with some of these issues. So there we are. We've talked about sex. You're not going to hear this subject in the church. They're not going to talk about it. What you say in the comments, I'm going to reply to. So jump in there and comment. And thank you for joining Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham.